I voted, Brian, and you voted. And something about this 2020 presidential election feels different. It kind of shook us to our core. And so today on the Introspection Hour with Brian and Patrick, we're really going to talk about the elephant that's all over our social media, President Donald Trump. And then we're going to talk a little bit about what my hat means. And if you are a part of the Yang Gang, then you already know. And really, the bulk of this is really to talk about what it really changed in us. What did it really galvanize for us? Because, Brian, our President Donald Trump, he cray, man. Like he's just all over there, right? Like, but he's doing something that you told me, and I completely agree with. For our generation, especially the millennials who want to make a change in the world, and everyone else, he's galvanizing people to wake up to the craziness, acceptance that we've had of the status quo in politicians and in politics. So I don't know, maybe that was a good thing, but like you had a very different reaction to why you needed to vote this year, right? Like, what was your story?
In 2016, I was living in Michigan where, me and my ex were living in Ann Arbor at the time. And I was going through Reddit and just kind of going through the whole political subreddit, kind of figuring out, is Hillary going to win? Is Trump going to win? And I've never really been into politics. Like, you've known me for 20 some years now. I never gave two craps about politics. I woke up that Wednesday morning or Thursday morning, I don't remember, the day after election, and I checked Reddit, and the first thing that came up was the fact that President Donald Trump has won the election. I'm not gonna lie, the first thing that I thought that went through my mind was, holy crap, I can't believe it. Are we in trouble? Yeah. Right? And that's what got me into politics, where it's like, I realized how important this election cycle really is and can be.
Yeah, and what happened even worse was like everyone's fears of like worst case scenario, it's not a laughing matter, but it came true. Like the probability of that, like, sure, who could have predicted it, but it highlighted and it just exposed the craziness of just the Beltway, the Washington, D.C. Beltway that they call it, the favors, the lobbyists, the companies, the way that legislation is written and how one-sided it could be, right? And how decisions are not made for the people or even by the people. The decisions are made by those that, serve a lot of the corporate lobbyists and things like that. But like you, like I was really disengaged for a while too. I mean, I still voted every presidential election when I turned 18, but at the same time, I never gave to a presidential campaign. I didn't watch the debates. This year around, I mean, you were watching debates. I was watching debates. I was watching the Democratic primaries, hence my hat with Andrew Yang. But, President Trump has dismantled so much of our institutions that it's kind of this wake-up call. And I feel like that's something that there's a positive out of this, right? So if there's one positive out of President Trump becoming president and doing all the things that he did, is that there's more of a generation saying, look, we can't continue business as usual. We can't even continue business as today. Things have got to change. That shook me to my core. It's been shaking me, and I'm like, man, is this really what, like, I what is it like? We knew politics was corrupt and bad and dysfunctional, but like, Brian, like, I can't believe it's this bad, right? It boggles my mind.
It's crazy, Patrick. Like, for the last 4 years, I had forgotten, like, honestly, what leadership sounds like. Like, we've all seen Trump's Twitter tantrums pretty much almost every day. If something doesn't go his way, for example, he'll basically bitch and complain about the people that are against him, right? The fake news media, CNN, all of these conspirators who are out to get him. That's not what a leadership sounds like or should sound like. You know what I mean? And especially right now with COVID-19, for example, there have been numerous like segments about him not really caring about what's really going on. And actually today, I mean, granted, CNN, right? Where they asked him, Trump, if you could do anything that would change the predicament or the outcome of COVID-19, what would you do? His response, honestly, not much.
Yeah.
Right? And you could see it in all of the countries, for example, like Europe, South Korea, I don't know, all of the other countries that are doing much better. New Zealand actually has 0 cases.
Yep.
You know that?
Yeah.
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 And that's why leadership is so important. Because people look up to you, right? We need guidance. We always need a leader. And I feel like for the last 4 years, we haven't really been having a leader lead this country. If anything, we've been divided, right? We all know that now, right? But that's also the good thing. That's also the good, in a way, right? It's galvanized people like you. It's galvanized people like me. All of these Black Lives Matter protesters or who are just trying to get social justice in play, especially now where we're now more than ever, where we are so much in tune with what we want as a society. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's getting a lot clearer, at least where the inequities are. It's getting a lot clearer where it's getting more magnified. Let me put it that way. I think it's always been clear, but it hasn't had this magnification that we've always needed in society, especially with like social media, with digital media. It changed the game, and so the information that we get is so different. And I gotta agree with you, man. Like, knowing and learning about the inequities has actually been something that, and that's what drew me to Andrew Yang when he was running for president, within the Democratic field, and trying to get the nomination. But what he did, that again, it shook me to my core, because he stated the problems we were actually having in society. His main principal thing was universal basic income, and this idea that capitalism doesn't need to start at 0 or negative in a lot of people's cases, right? Like, you go to college, you start with debt. So you're starting negative. You're not even starting at 0. Then when you start at 0, everything's stacked against you to not make more money. And everything, there's systematic ways. And the one thing that'll just get people out of that is to actually give them cash and trust them that they're going to spend it the way that they need to have it spent. The way that they needed to make their lives fulfilling. And so he went around, and as much as, he joked about the Asian guy that, that does math or that likes math, math is actually an acronym that says Make America Think Harder. And this is where he was talking about why, like, prescription drug companies, right? People always think, oh, we're going to get the companies to do better. We're going to get the companies to be more honest or something like that. No. He just said it plain out. They only care about money. So the only thing that's going to make them change is not some law that says they have to be good corporate citizens. It's to affect their bottom line. And you could do it systematically through legislation if they want to sell drugs in the US, prescription drugs in the US. Yeah.
Other countries already subsidize drug medications. Like, the fact that we hear news, for example, diabetes medications or special medications for very specific cases where you're spending like $800 for like a 1 month prescription, that's ridiculous. And that's not fair. And we all know the pharmaceutical lobby is huge. And I know I don't want to spend too much on this specific topic because we could all day. But I do want to bring up your point with UBI, for example, universal basic income. I know for a lot of people, I personally would love to have this, right? I know we've had this conversation off camera, but imagine having that extra $1,000, even $500, where that money can go to your food. It can go towards like a partial portion of your rent, and you don't have to worry as much, right?
Yeah. And there were 2 principles that he really didn't budge on that I think were really key with UBI and universal basic income, which he called the freedom dividend. One, it needs to be universal. None of this means testing, deciding who gets it, who doesn't. If you are an American citizen, you get it. If you're a tax-paying, participant in our system, maybe you get some of it or something like that. Just universally, it needs to happen because that way it takes away all the stigma, right? And the stigma of being on food stamps, on welfare, getting disability, whatever that stigma is for getting extra benefits or extra help. That stigma goes away with the universality of it.
But Patrick,
right?
we're talking about socialism, man. Socialism is bad, don't you know that?
But then the second thing defeats the whole socialism argument, which says the government is not going to tell you how to spend your money. The government is just going to provide a mechanism for you to be a part of the gains, right? And he talked about GDP. Everyone's talking about, look at how good GDP is, and we have 30 plus million unemployed, right? Like GDP doesn't help people. It's not meant for people. And he gave really great suggestions, innovative ideas. But more importantly, what he did for me, Brian, he identified the problem. He identified that following GDP as an economic indicator of your country is not the correct measure.
Without spending 5 minutes or 10 minutes on it, what are the problems that he proposed actually? So I don't know. I actually don't know.
One was the first one was UBI. And then he actually had a whole list of different proposals that he addressed in various ways, whether it be prescription drug prices, technology, tech companies. So there isn't three things, but I think for me, it was just his identification of the problems. His understanding of technology is just so helpful, right? And for me, the third thing is I bought his book. So besides contributing, I also bought his book, and I lost the cover, but it's The War on Normal People. And regardless of what you think about it, what he does outline very well are the compare and contrast and why we are where we are today for society and what is in the future. So he explained automation. He also did something that was really, really good, which is he appealed to people across the spectrum: Republicans, libertarians, Democrats, progressives, liberals, conservatives, whatever you call it, right? Whatever you identify yourself politically, he had someone in his support, right? People who supported him. And that was amazing. That was something we haven't seen in a very, very long time, or it felt like a very, very long time. And that was worthwhile for me. So I credit him a lot for getting me galvanized into paying attention to politics, paying attention to the news media, paying attention to the inequities. So that's kind of, a big part of what he did. There were a lot of examples I could give, and I can go on a lot, but maybe I'll do like a solo rant one day. But it's the same story that if you go on Reddit, if you go on Twitter, whatever, of people who ended up finding Andrew Yang at a certain point in their lives really helped see a positive light after hearing him talk. Right? As much as he identified problems, he proposed solutions with really thought out explanations, and that gave people hope. And I mean, giving people hope, that's like inspirational in terms of a leader and in terms of, what we need in this society. So that was a big portion of it. And that's really what changed me. And, even to think about, should I be, should I go run for Congress? And it's interesting. A lot of people, after hearing him, decided to go run for their local state elections, congressmen, senators, council members, and they're doing well. So that was a big thing. Brian, I did want to ask you, after you felt, all these things kind of even from like, President Trump, what is it that bothered you the most? Or what is it beyond the leadership? What is it that you're seeing that is shaking you to your core?
I mean, besides all of the other things that are constantly going on, a lot of it is basically I don't want to use the word, corruption is one, but I don't want to really talk about that, for example. I mean, Trump has done a lot of atrocities, or we could, again, talk about the corruption, the nepotism, the narcissism, all of that stuff, okay? The one thing that I do want to see, so going back a little bit to your Andrew Yang topic, it's not really about the topic itself, but the fact that I want to see positive changes. And we're seeing that right now, for example, right? We have a lot of movements such as the Black Lives Matter movement. And I know a lot of people are for it, but also a lot of people against it because of the whole police brutality thing, for example. Like, we all know for a fact that, you know, black people tend to get discriminated much more than, say, you or me, right?
Oh, yeah.
And I want to see, honestly, positive changes. And this is why, like, for example, marijuana, for example, is going to be decriminalized, right? At least that's what Biden is proposing. Like, if he gets voted in, marijuana, you know, all of people who've got marijuana charges are going to be basically, I think, released from, I don't remember if I read that correctly or not, or if that was a proposal. But either way, I want to see positive changes. Things like UBI, why that is so important. If you start looking at all these, quote, socialist countries, let's put it this way, bro. Social Security is a socialist program. Schools are a socialist program. Paying for your roads. You know that program GoFundMe, bro? Not bro, but GoFundMe. What do you think that is?
It's literally asking other people to, you know,
and people do it.
To give you money.
Right? People do it, right? Like, let's say, for example, you know, I'm a 35-year-old male. I suddenly have terminal lung cancer. I can't afford these expenses. So what do? I go to GoFundMe and say, hey guys, will you please help donate $100,000 for my care? If you have a right cause, people will pay to help support you. Why can't we have that for everything, dude?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, think about it this way. People hate the word raising taxes, but sometimes it's needed for better programs. Like, imagine, I don't know my history very well, so help me out here if I can, but I can't imagine being back in, let's say, the 1900s where we had poor worker conditions. We didn't have like 40-hour work week. We had basically almost slave labor where you went to work from Monday through Sunday every day of the week, working 12, 14-hour shifts. You had all these inequities that our great grandparents grew up with. And look at us now where we're actually like, yeah, we get to work from home and all of these great benefits because we felt like we could live our lives better, right? Progressives is about looking forward to the future and not constantly looking into the past and living in the past. And that's what people need to start realizing.
Yeah, and even the solutions that we entertain, the reasons of why we're doing it, it doesn't need to. We shouldn't be trying to replicate the solutions of the past to fix the problems that we have today. And that's what we get from the current set of politicians. And that was what was so refreshing about Andrew Yang, you know. Tax system, corporate taxes, right? And business taxes. That's why Donald Trump pays $750, Amazon pays $0. Okay. And we go, we need to raise taxes. No, Andrew Yang says we need to change the way we tax them. We need to change our system of tax. And then he talked about proposing a value added tax, you know, of 10%. And then people got all crazy, you know, pros and cons, but it's okay because the conversation was happening. And so I think what it also did in that hope for me and for what I saw in a lot of people is that there is a recognition that we can't do the same things over and over, and we got to start doing something differently, right? I don't know, man. Like it really got me going for a long while, and then when he didn't win or when he was starting to lose and he dropped out, I was like, oh. Like I was pretty sad.
So going back to what you were saying, actually, we can't keep doing the same thing over and over and over. We talk a lot about this in our channel, in our podcast, about how constantly doing the same routine over and over and over leads to no changes. And for people who are unhappy, let's say, right, with their lives, you could compare life to politics, where if you're continually doing the same thing over and over and over, and you expect things to change, nothing's going to happen. You know what I mean? And this is why progressives are, in a way, pushing for these crazy ideas like UBI, Medicare for all. I mean, these are not new ideas, to be honest. A lot of Scandinavian countries are doing this already, and it's working for them.
Although you might get some pushback on some progressives, they don't like UBI in general, but they make up their own. Anyway, so without going too deep into that, there was something important that you said for all of us, which is this other realization that I had. When you look at the average tenure and time that a congressman or a senator has been in their position, in their jobs, right? It's as long as we've been alive, Brian. So if nothing else, the thing that's different is a lot of our generation has started to wake up and be like, dude, I think we're going to need to run for Congress because, man, we need to get those people out of there.
Right?
It's funny you say that because I know since this was like a high school joke thing, you want to run for president. The fact that you were born in Colorado, like, hey, you can be a president in the future. And it's funny you bring that up actually, because I actually thought about doing that too. Like, maybe I should try and run for like a local, political position because I feel like maybe I can make some positive changes, right? Because that's what we need. We need some new blood. We need some new people. We need some younger, new people who understand technology, who understand the current plights of, let's say, millennials and younger. Because you're right. The current politicians we have now are like 60 years old, 70 years old.
They're
who are they
80.
going to favor? Your parents' generation, right? Not us. They don't care, essentially. They don't know what we're going through because what they went through when they were our age is completely different from what we're dealing with now.
And they don't even take time to realize what the differences are and why it's different. They just see the negatives that we portray supposedly in their mind, which is such a very it's a loss of empathy, Brian. I mean, we've talked about this offline, but like, if nothing else, the politicians, when someone says, like, on a journalistic sense, they've lost their sense of reality or they lost their sense of touch with the people, right? It's more, to me, they lost their empathy. They lost their connection and feeling for the other people that you spot on, right? I mean, yeah. So there was this comment that Speaker Pelosi made where she was like, "We feed the people," and she was talking about Congress, and I'm like, no, that made me so mad, Brian. I was just like angry. I'm like, what do you mean you feed the people? You never fed me. Right? Like it just hurt on a different level. And it was so condescending to my parents, to me, to just even, every other American out there. Like, why would you? And I feel like that's just that loss of empathy, that loss of touch with the people that they should be representing. And, I feel like now, moving forward, we need to really pay attention to county sheriff elections, local elections, school boards, even the congressional and Senate races. And we need to pay attention to some of the legislations, but and react differently. We got to react differently if things are going to be things are going to be better for us. And yeah, man, like, as much as we joked about me running for president just because I've passed the threshold. I was born in the United States, lived here for 10 years, and I'm over 35. So I technically qualify. But as we learned, it takes more than just, are you fitting those couple of basic requirements? But we do need to change different. And I would say, like, for me, I'm going to start paying attention. I'm going to, vote differently. I'm going to be researching candidates. I'm going to be paying attention to what they say. And it's crazy because I looked up who was the, congressional representative in where I live now in Southern Maryland. That congressman is actually the second most senior in the Democratic Party on the House side. And he's been in Congress longer than I've been alive, I think, or just as long. I'm like, that's ridiculous, Brian. And if nothing else, we definitely need new blood, right? So I don't know. I think I'm going to do that differently. Are you going to do anything differently? Are you going to run for local office, Brian?
So Patrick, to answer your question, I really do consider running. I mean, I have no background, right? But I think a lot of times you just have to learn as you go, right? As long as you have the good moral compass, you have the dedication to actually be a civil servant and actually represent the people. I think that's pretty much all you need to know, right? You could always learn the rules essentially on the job, I think. But for me, again, I just started getting into politics 4 years ago. And since then, I feel like for all of us, not just voting Trump out and hoping that the guy goes away, but we have to continue to be consistent with our political beliefs and our And we want to make sure that we see those positive changes, right? Continuing to follow what's going on in the political news, not just because of what Trump has done over the last 4 years. We need to elect new people. Like we have people like AOC, what's her name? Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, that's known by her acronym, AOC, who she's young. She's like 28.
Yeah,
right?
she's younger than us, at least.
Something like that. And we need people like that who actually, and she's a really good person in a way where she actually cares about the people, right? And we need people like that. So, I mean, my take on this is that, you know, no matter what happens, like we need to vote. I already voted the minute I got my ballot. We need to continue to stand up for what is right and what we all essentially believe in, and not just for ourselves, but actually for our grandchildren, our great grandchildren, and for the future. Like, we need progress.
Yeah, I completely agree in terms of, you know, everything that you said. And it doesn't matter whether or not you're right on every single topic, but as long as you bring out your values, you bring out your principles, right? Discovering what they are for you, for your community, for the society that we're going to leave for future generations. We need to be putting those into actions, putting those into legislation and things of that nature. And that can happen at multiple levels. So, you know, we're just out here trying to share some positivity, some positive vibes amongst this craziness. And that's what you're going to get when you listen to the Introspection Hour with Brian and Patrick. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys.